Holly Morehouse at Vermont Afterschool. We're just going to give it 30 more seconds or so and let everybody get in through Zoom and get set up. As you're joining, if you could do two things, make sure that your microphone is muted unless you're speaking, that would be awesome. And also, if you don't mind changing the way your name is displayed, if it isn't already, to let us know who you are, that is awesome as well. It helps us in the chat and trying to follow up on specific questions, and helps us connect people to one another. That would be great. Looks like we still have a few coming in. So as people are getting settled, thank you so much for joining us in what is a crazy week. Many of you I know are still running summer programs, and you're also trying to get ready for school reopening and finding the role there and what you need to do to serve children, youth, and families. So we appreciate all of your efforts there. A couple of quick Zoom logistics around the microphones. Also, if anything comes up that's weird or unexpected and we have to end the meeting, and we will follow up on email. So watch for that, and hopefully we won't be in that situation. Also, we'll use the chat both during the panel and in the discussion afterwards. Feel free to put questions in there, ideas that you want to share. We download that and compile it and can get the information out to the right people or follow up on your questions and so forth. So please feel free to use that. Also, feel free, if you've got the full version of Zoom, to use the reaction buttons. As people are speaking, it's really, really hard to speak at a computer screen without the visual clues and the, being in the room. So anything you can do to help our panels and our guests and so forth, that is greatly appreciated. So thank you for that. As we've been doing, throughout this whole time as a field, I just want to reiterate our three things that we're trying to do. And one is to really get everybody to stay in the conversation. Even when it's hard, even when the stuff is coming out, doesn't look quite right, don't back away from the conversation, engage and stay in, because that's the only way that we can tweak things and get to where we need to be. Also, we're always trying to, as a field, to stay in the problem solving mode. So as you hear things today, how does it apply to what you've got? What problems do you have that maybe someone hasn't addressed? Really trying to stay in that mode, like we try to do with children and youth that we work with, and so we can be forward moving and not get stuck just talking about everything that's wrong, but how do we move forward? And then also making some noise. We do have the petition out and a sign-on letter, for after school to be more fully integrated into local plans around reopening, and that's really what this panel and this call is about today. So if you haven't signed that yet or shared that yet, please do. Also, in response to last week, we heard loud and clear from you that staffing is a big concern, having enough staff to work in your programs. So we jumped right on that. We are launching a statewide staffing campaign with some real positive messaging about finding a job in after school or making a difference in children's lives and looking at that space. We'll be putting that out on Front Porch Forum, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There's a flyer. All those materials we'll share with you after the call, so you can use them and tweak them. It basically has some generic language and some great imaging. If people end up calling us at the state level, we will connect them back to you all at the local level, but it also says to reach out to programs locally if someone's interested. And we're going to be working through colleges, trying to find young people or people that are home on a gap year or taking classes from home who might have the time to work in your program. So thank you for that great suggestion. Also, before we go to the panel, just a couple of heads up on next week. The call on Tuesday. So Tuesdays is the really interactive sharing calls. Is going to be about talking with kids and families about COVID. So if you want to get into a deeper discussion with colleagues around the state about how you're doing that and learn what they're doing. Tuesday would be the call for that. And then next Wednesday, Auburn Watersong, who is the state lead on resilience of the Agency for Human Services, is going to do an hour-and-a-half workshop for us on vicarious trauma and burnout. So that is a great one for every one of us to be on, as well as any staff or site coordinators that you want to offer up that support to. Those are all my announcements. I am going to turn it over to Nicole Miller to introduce our panel, and I'm going to send that over to her with like a huge, immense thanks to all of our panel members and the school leaders for taking the time to be in this conversation and to be on this call and to share what you're doing, and also to thank you for being in partnership with your after-school partners and colleagues in this way. So Nicole, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Holly, and certainly want to echo those thanks. I want to jump right into you all hearing from after-school leaders and their school day partners. So I'd like to first introduce Heather Moore, who's the director of LEAPS, and her superintendent, Lynn Cota, at Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union. So Heather and Lynn.
Thank you, Nicole. I'll go ahead and get us started, and Heather's going to be jumping in as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today about the importance of after school being a part of our reopening plan. So in Franklin Northeast, Heather has really been instrumental, and Heather and her team, in thinking about how to support kids not just around reopening, but also around summer programming. So we all know our kids have been away from us for quite some time, and they were really the first group to welcome kids back. So we were able to ramp up a summer program with much success in Franklin Northeast, and we're really proud of that. I think that the way we structured our reopening was we really thought about it through the lens of task groups. So we had 9 teams really focused on specific things like curriculum and instruction, social emotional learning, student services, health and safety, transportation, food service, after school program, leadership, policy, finance, and I missed one in there, Heather, but LEAPS was certainly working through that after school program piece was really important. So Heather was the leader of her own task group centered around LEAPS and what that would look like. Each of our groups were tasked with looking at, you know, the year as a whole and thinking forward to, if we spend some time in a step 1 where all of our kids are fully remote, how would we look at our programming and plan for that strategically in advance? What would it look like at a step 2, and what would it look like at a step 3? So that's really how our framework is set up. So Heather also had a nurse lead coordinator who was assigned to her. So the health and safety piece was really well supported in all of our task teams. Also, we strategically put our curriculum coordinator, who's also our consolidated federal grant leader, with Heather, because I am sure this is true to many of you, funding isn't, you know, we don't have a surplus of funding. So we try to be really strategic with all of the dollars that we receive, whether they're local through our 21C after school program, or if they're consolidated federal dollars. We like to make sure that we're being strategic and collaborating, and not each of us kind of doing our own thing and hoping that it makes sense. So Heather had some really good collaboration with that partner, and also through the lens of connecting the work of after school to the work of the school day. So those were really important. I heard you talk, Holly, about the staff piece. That has been tough, and it continues to be tough. And Heather's been at all of our weekly meetings with our school leaders and our Summer Leadership Institute, and really thinking through and talking about, you know, what are the things we're going to need around health and safety, and thinking about, you know, are we going to put bus monitors on our buses? And if so, what does that do to the staffing we have available to us for before school programming? And some of our schools are feeling it's really important to have a bus monitor at least to start the year for our after school runs, because we want to ensure that kids are following the health and safety guidelines on the bus as well. So all of those conversations Heather has been a part of, because those decisions have implications on her. So it really, our approach, I feel, it's super necessary that it's just really collaborative. The other piece is, because we're opening in a hybrid model, We definitely have issues around childcare for families. So we've been trying to be really creative about partnerships with other childcare partners, but also ramping up something that we can offer to families on Wednesdays within each of our communities. So Heather is helping to coordinate that, and we're looking at that as an opportunity to use our support staff to be able to provide some enrichment and some facilitated academic support for our students on that day. And it's also in partnership with the principals who are running a part of that day as a callback opportunity for students. So there'll be a connection between the principals and the students who are called back and the students who will be working on the enrichment side as well. I think that I just want to reiterate that, you know, the importance of our thinking forward is about flexibility, because the steps we have ahead of us are so uncertain, and that's part of the planning that Heather's done. So she really knows, like, if we're in a fully virtual situation, her and her team have really planned, her and her coordinators and the reopening team have really thoroughly planned forward to what they can offer in a fully virtual, what they can offer in hybrid that includes virtual and in person. And if we get to the place where we can get everybody back, they have some really great plans there. So Heather, what do you want to add in there?
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, it's been amazing to be like fully integrated and part of this team. Like Lynn said, our program doesn't necessarily have to be reactive to situations. We know what's going on in the school and the various levels of our reopening plan. So that means we're prepared for it, or as prepared as we can be. You know, we're part of that conversation. Outside of our weekly leadership meetings, weekly coordinator meetings, but then we're bringing that conversation back with principals. So it's kind of a full circle of, so this has sort of shifted. How do we problem solve or address that change? And we have, so there's 10 schools in our SU, but we have 8 different after school programs, which means we have to come up with 8 individualized program structures in some cases because of difference in buildings or the layout of the parking lot for drop off and pickup time. But these isn't having to come up with their own plans for anything. We're so integrated into the school system that we're taking the school day pickup procedures and adopting it into our system so that it's a seamless transition for families and staff, so we don't have to do duplicate training for anybody. In our reopening plans, we're really looking at our 4 reporting goals that we report to the AOE, and that's how we're kind of structuring, like, what, you know, how do we be innovative in addressing our program goals, and the program goals are identified by community needs in each of our 6 towns that we have, so knowing the differences and how we can support our families both in person and in the 2 different remote models we have, which is online and take-home kits, because we know that online learning doesn't work for everybody for various reasons.
Thank you, Lynn and Heather. We really appreciate hearing how you have worked together and all the ways that you're thinking about integrating after school and before school programming into what's happening with the school day model. I want to pick up on something that Lynn said. She mentioned, you know, that the curriculum coordinator was a part of Heather's task force team, and thinking about funding and strategy around how you use those dollars and work within the systems that you already have. And with that, I want to welcome Amy Masse, who is the curriculum instruction and assessment coordinator at Orleans Southwest, and Ceilidh Galloway-Kane, who is the program director of REACH there in OSSU as well. And wondering if the 2 of you can share a little bit about your plan and how you guys are thinking about things in your district.
Sorry, had to unmute. Thanks for having us. These are really exciting times. I guess that's just the way I have to describe it these days. So many things changing all the time. Yeah, OSSU has really embraced 3 main models. And in person, which is our primary goal, is to get most kids back as long as they can safely come back, within the building spaces. We're offering a remote synchronous model, and we're connecting with VTVLC, which is Vermont Virtual Learning Cooperative. And so we have, at the end of the school year, we spent some time, our staff had some staff days where we could reflect on remote learning and how that went, what were some challenges, and we really began the reopening, if you will, lens work right then in June. But even before that, Kaylee and I connected last summer, both of us new to OSSU in our positions that we're currently holding, and really wanted to expand the collaboration between my position as curriculum director and grants, and her position as the after school coordinator and reach coordinator. And how do we make reach become more of an extension of the day? And we really went back to looking at our OSSU vision and mission statements and really tried to do that work of where does it fit in. Immediately we asked Kaylee to join our leadership team. And so she attends all leadership team meetings and is part of the day-to-day function and planning that we do together. And that's been critical to really seeing after school in a completely different lens. So after school is an extension of our day, just as other outside school activities and opportunities are. So that's really been critical in our plans moving forward. But in terms of the planning of for reopening, Kaylee was essential, was a critical member in establishing the essential childcare program for OSSU. And so we really took that opportunity to figure out the safety, all the safety pieces, and kind of use it as a dry run of how we could reopen. And so with that, one of our primary focuses is on learner agency and reflective practices. And so building in personalized learning opportunities.
What kind of candy?
Whoops. Any kind of personalized learning opportunities or connections to student strengths and goal setting and reflection. Kaylee's connecting with staff members, not just principals, and really trying to bring in any themes that classes are working on and folding it into the extended day. What else, Kaylee? Kaylee's part of our SOARS team. SOARS is our safe opening and reentry team. So she is also working on all the safety precautions that schools need to put into place, and has been a key coordinator in that. So the two of us are sitting on lots of these committees and really just trying to make sure that those connections are strong. Kaylee, what do you want to add to that?
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I reiterate what you said about the new to have a coordinator and really like for school was. Can you still hear me?
Kaylee, you're breaking up a little bit. I tried turning off your video to see if it would help your sound a little bit.
Okay, is that better, Nicole?
Still breaking up a little bit on my end.
I can try and switch devices if that's helpful.
Okay, why don't we move to Ryan and to Jeff, and then Kaylee, we'll come back to you. Does that sound like a plan?
Okay. That sounds fine.
Okay. So, Amy, thank you for sharing about OSSU's plan, and we'll get back to Kaylee. But I want to turn to Ryan Heraty, who's the principal at Union Elementary in Montpelier, and Jeff O'Hare, who's part of part 2. And so would the two of you talk a little bit about how you're working in consultation with each other and planning around Montpelier's reopening plans?
Absolutely. Hi, Nicole. Thank you for having us. Hi, everybody. So my name's Ryan Heraty. I'm principal in Montpelier at Union Elementary School. We're a pre-K to grade 4 school. We have about 430 kids. We had around 80 kids in our after-school program last year. This year, I think we're slated to have 60 to 80 in the program again. this year. Something that Jeff and I talked earlier today, and something we were thinking about that seems maybe unique in some conversations that we're hearing that are happening around the state, is kind of learning from our after-school program. And so Jeff and I had a conversation back in March or April, and Jeff at that time was really preparing for essential care. And so he was, in constant webinars and, on the front lines with the medical experts, while we at the time were really focused on remote learning, and we weren't really thinking about having students in our building. And then we had to make a pretty fast adjustment to thinking about essential care workers in our community and how we were going to provide care for them. And so having Jeff on the front lines and being able to go to him right away and say, hey, Jeff, what do you think? He was really an amazing resource for us, that he could say, hey, well, this is what people are doing right now. This is what the medical experts are recommending. This is what we're doing to mitigate risk. And as we started putting together our plans for returning in the fall, I think some of those initial lessons that we had learned from those conversations really were in line with all of the webinars we started watching and all the medical experts we started hearing. Really were referring to a lot of those preliminary principles around risk mitigation and how can you bring kids safely back into the building. And so as we put together our plan for the district, we really focused on a pod model and really trying to figure out a way when kids are coming in the building, how can they remain in their pod model so that they're having real minimal contact with other students and having minimal contact with other adults. And that just made a lot of sense to us. And I think that, that really came from what the essential care worker plans were over the closure period. So by having that information, we were able to put our plan together, I would say 2 months ago, and having that information in place, having a plan in place, we've been able to really partner with our community, partner with parents, partner with students. We've really been able to have a very thorough process in thinking through a lot of things. With that being said, it could all change tomorrow, and we realize how fragile this whole thing is. And, we think about that all the time. But, I just wanted to really emphasize that point that I feel fortunate we were able to learn from our after-school program and have a really positive foundation in place, a collaborative relationship to do that. Jeff, you want to tack on to that?
Yeah. So part 2 works with Montpelier District. We work with CVU or CVSD, sorry, and MMU USD. And the thing that really set Montpelier apart was they were the first school that I know of that made a decision. Here's what we're doing in the fall. And they went with a 5-day-a-week, kids coming back 1 o'clock. And the reason why that was super important for us is it actually gave us something concrete to plan around. I don't know how everyone else is feeling, but there's a ton of hypotheticals out there. If this ends up being the schedule, here's what our program is going to look like. If this is our schedule, this is what the program is going to look like. And I can tell you that it's incredibly difficult to plan for the hypothetical. What's been amazing about Montpelier is that they made a decision, and now it's allowed us this time to collaborate and plan and figure out what's going to work best. And now we're so far ahead of, Ryan's putting together pods in his school building, and now we're taking a look at those pods. Who in those pods are going to after school? How can we then take those pods and create pods of our own, where we may not be able to have 18 pods. I know we're not going to have 18 pods in our after school program, but can we combine a couple of pods, again, for that risk mitigation? And that's the thing that I think sets Montpelier apart, is that they were able to say, here's what we're doing. Like Ryan said, it might change tomorrow and it might be completely different, but it feels so good knowing here's a plan, here's what we have to work with, and now how are we going to work around it? And I think the other thing that I'll mention is that I don't know if this is the case everywhere, but I have a direct line to Ryan and Superintendent Bonesteel, and and I can call them up, I can text them, and they will get right back to me. And that feels so good. Just feeling like we do matter, that we're a part of the bigger picture. And again, I have that relationship with the other districts, but I'm not sure if that's the case everywhere. And just them believing in us being appreciative of everything that they're doing is super important.
Yeah, Jeff and Ryan, thank you for sharing with us. It definitely sounds like there are some pretty familiar themes, right? They're around communication and being really integral parts of what's happening in the school system, and being tied into those. And also something that we saw from summer programs or those that ran essential care is really using those experiences as lesson learned to be able to start formulating those reopening plans, right? Like Ryan was saying, relying on the experiences that they had to be able to look at, okay, how do we create pods? How do we create safety around, the health regulations and all those pieces? So thank you. I want to go back to Kaylee. Kaylee, are you back with us? Did she pop back out?
I didn't see her. Oh wait, she's in the waiting room. Take her a second. As she's coming in, I really appreciate Jeff and Ryan what you're saying about knowing. Like you can address a problem knowing that decision. And I wondered for the group, because all of you pretty early invited after school to the table, made them a structural part of the planning. What advice do you have for us as a field in working with other school leaders who don't have that relationship yet? Like what would help convince them or win them over to, opening that door, that place that seat at the table, coming from an educator leader point of view?
I can tackle that if you want.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan.
I think one thing is that from an administrator perspective, we have so many things coming at us all the time, like a lot of us do, and it helps to get into a real schedule and a routine. So throughout the year, we had a weekly meeting with Caitlin from Part 2, who's our program director here. And, she pushed that at the beginning. And, admittedly, I didn't want to be locked into that every single week because, it's so hard to balance your schedule. But, over the long term, it's really been a positive thing because we've built a really positive relationship. We always have things to talk about. And whether it's long-term planning or short-term planning, I think just getting locked into that weekly meeting, even if it's only 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just something to have a consistent, predictable time to connect.
That's a great suggestion. It is true, right? With COVID, like where relationships were strong, they kind of held steady, and where there wasn't a relationship, it's really a hard time to build one. So I appreciate what you're saying. I don't know if Amy or Lynn.
I would just ditto what Jeff's just said. I think it's really important, we're all so busy and the agenda can have those kind of those nuts and bolts to do things all the time. But I think what happens when you invite other players to the table is that it creates some space for the creativity and innovative pieces to kind of shine through. And I find that by having Kaylee, our after school coordinator, and we also invite a community partners person to the table as well. And by bringing them in, it not only does it give them the lens that we're functioning under, but it also opens up some creative space. And I think sometimes, we get so bogged down with all the heavy stuff that we need that opportunity to just think about something a little differently, or let's try that out in after school program and see how that works. And we really try to embrace that idea that after school is an extension of the day, no different than any other extracurricular that we would offer. So.
I can add on a little bit to what you just said, Amy. I think that one of the things that is helpful is if you can help, I agree, Ryan just said something that stands out to me is that our leaders are really extremely busy, and they're juggling a lot of things right now and always, but it's even more right now. So I think helping them to see the connection so that after school doesn't feel like something separate. I think that's why we've had some success with after school in Franklin Northeast because it isn't something separate. Heather's a part of our team. She worked right out of my office. So she's a part of all of the planning that we do. So, you know, when we're talking about curriculum and instruction and grants, like that's always at the table with us. We're always thinking about after school at the same time. So just anything you can do to help your leaders to see after school as not being separate, but as a part of the overall programming for students, I think would be helpful.
Thank you. Nicole, I think Kaylee's back.
She is. Kaylee, can you hear us okay?
I'm glad I brought 3 devices to the office today. Can you hear me okay?
We can, and that's part of being flexible, right? It's what we're talking about today. So Kaylee, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, from your perspective, and you actually previously were working at a community organization prior to your role at REACH, but thinking about, you know, what does that integration mean for you being on the ground, and then also thinking about how are you overcoming some of those challenges around staffing and space, which is a pretty common theme for most programs right now.
Yeah, sure. So there, I think when I got cut off, I was starting to just talk about the leadership team and how important it is, not just for myself as a leader, but for our after school program to be represented in that space. And, you know, it's been amazing to be a part of a team that is so diverse, as Amy was saying. And so my background is in nonprofit work, which is pretty different. So it's been a great learning curve for me to be a part of the education system. And I feel like that previous experience can offer a lot of community input and maybe some different systems and creative thinking. And through the reentry process, it's been really exciting to see not only the ways that each school is working, but how the district vision as a whole is really pulling all of us together and lifting up our district and our students and our families. That's one of the best parts of my week, are the leadership team meetings. And our program has really adapted to that. So we, through our recent 21st Century grant, are now at all 5 schools in the district, and our programming is supporting all the different communities in those schools, but we're also doing a lot of exciting work around district-wide programming, district-wide remote programming that we started this summer. And then we're also thinking about that in terms of staffing and space. So staffing, as we all know, is challenging regardless. After school is particularly challenging because 2:30 to 5 or 5:30 is a tricky time. And so we're really thinking about how we're using the strengths of our staff, whether it's site coordinators or teachers or community members or community partners, and really working together, not just as like a Hardwick site or a Craftsbury site, but actually as like a REACH district-wide site. And so that's been exciting to see. We were able to kind of practice that this summer we had a summer challenge program, and one of our site coordinators organized this really robust, exciting, self-paced challenge for the whole district that brought kids together who might not have met otherwise, which was this wonderful outcome. And we also had another site coordinator who was reorganizing and doing lots of great on-the-ground work. And it really kind of helped me see as a leader that it's stronger if we're staffing as a whole community and not just as individual sites. So I'm excited to take that forward. Space, I'm like generally just an optimist. So we're just like going with it. And you know, we keep saying outside space. I'm really digging into what does that mean? What does it look like for after school? It's totally different for every single school, but you know, I was just meeting with our art teacher to figure out the front of the space. We're going to order some of at Hardwick Elementary School. I'm helping to dig some plant beds to like rearrange the outside space. Like we're all just helping out to make it work. And just one last thing for staffing, we're again just thinking about this district-wide idea. So we're having a rather than having individual site registration forms this fall, we're going to have one registration form for every family and every site. And that includes options for a virtual, totally virtual option. It includes a remote hybrid option, and then, an in-person option, and then a fully in-person option. So it's really mirroring the three different options that we have during the school day. And again, it's just how much can our after-school programs be reflective of that day. And it's exciting because we have, if a child does need to stay home, or if there's a break at all throughout the school day, we're not going back to the spring where we're surprised by it. We're ready for it. We've got the systems, we've got the curriculum. But again, if anybody is looking for work in the Northeast Kingdom and want to work for the Reach After School program, we're hiring.
Appreciate your plug, Kaylee. Yeah, I think one of the things I heard as you were sharing was talking about looking at your system as a whole, right? And that's something that Lynn and Heather spoke about, and Jeff and Ryan shared, and just really thinking about, what is that upper level approach that you're taking, and maybe doing things differently than you previously had. So really appreciate your comments on that. I want to turn now to Jay Nichols, who's the Executive Director of the Vermont Principals Association. Welcome, Jay.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Holly didn't tell me what we were talking about. She told me I could talk about whatever I wanted. So I'm just going to take leave with that. So I'm going to try to zoom back a little bit to more of a statewide perspective. I appreciate all the specific things that people have shared. So just some thoughts. As a superintendent and as a principal and as a state level leader, I've always supported high quality after school programs, and I think they're at least as important now as they ever have been before. I see them as an essential programming that are really a fundamental extension of the school day and a critical necessity for parents as well as schools. We know that after school programming addresses the latchkey kid syndrome that our current economic and societal variables require in Vermont and in the United States. We also know that many parents are in situations where children are latchkey, and maybe both parents are working, maybe there's only one parent in the home. A high percentage of our kids live in either foster care situations or with a grandparent. And the times between 3 and 7 typically are the most critical times for children in terms of perhaps being left unsupervised, which is where after school programming comes in so importantly. As we talk about that all said, we're entering a time of incredible ambiguity in the state of Vermont right now. School districts are all over the place in terms of how they're going to open this fall. It's a catch as catch can. The school districts right next to each other have different plans than the one next door to them. We really don't know what school is going to look like this year. We can plan all we want, but what we do know is that whatever we plan, it's very likely to change tomorrow, or the next day. So where do ASP programs fit into this new world of ambiguity? The truth is, I don't know in terms of a statewide answer for all. In some places, after-school programming may take place all day. Perhaps at a school, for example, if a school is fully remote, parents might be able to send students to the school when the parents are at work, and they may be able to use the actual school structure if the school is in a fully remote environment. Further, I think the hybrid model with half students in person and half remote really raises a lot of questions in terms of the after-school programming. Will students and parents be able to attend the school on days where they're home for remote? Well, probably not, because of the spacing needs of the school. So that will mean, can after-school programs come up with other spaces that they can actually provide services to these kids during that time? And of course, with that, there's legal and liability issues and things that need to be worked out, whether or not a space is safe and usable and so on. The other question I have that I think connects to after-school programs is related to that. If I have a 6-year-old at home and my school has gone remote or hybrid and I can't send my kid to school, who watches my 6-year-old if I'm in a job where I have no choice but to go to work and I have no place for my child? I'm hoping after-school programs in some way, shape, or form can help address that. So do ASP programs find other spaces to provide support to students who are at home? And if so, what would that look like? What potential legal and liability issues might have to be considered to be addressed in those cases? I'm also worried, as was mentioned here by a few people, about school staffing as well as general staffing of after-school programming. I'm worried about whether or not we'll be able to actually staff the schools enough to have in-person learning. Hopefully after the first couple of weeks, people will see that our percentage is so low in Vermont, and if we take proper mitigation strategies, we should be okay. But if not, we have some schools that may not be able to open to full staffing in the beginning. Further, if I'm a teacher and I'm entering this new world, I think Lynn spoke to it a little bit about how much is going to be on teachers and principals' plates. I might have volunteered in the after-school program in the past, and I might be just completely wiped now. I might be like, you know what, all I can do is manage my day and get back home to my family. So I worry about staffing for after-school programs because of that variable as well. I think critical attention will need to take place between safety mitigation in the school, mirroring that safety mitigation in the after-school program or third space. And I think that several people here have talked about how important that is, that connection between the school and the after-school program personnel, and seeing that essentially as one entity to the degree possible. I think it was Heather and Lynn mentioned the callback concept. I think that's a great concept as long as transportation is provided with it so that kids can actually, there's no equity issue there. I think that's a wonderful idea. If you have a school that's going to be open a certain day and you can bring some kids back that need extra academic and or social emotional support, I think the after school program can be very helpful in that. I also want to reiterate that having task force that are charged with reopening schools consider the after school program and have those people involved is a great approach. I guess the key aspect to me is the importance of partnership, dialogue and collaboration between school leaders and after school leaders. To reiterate what I said yesterday at the governor's press conference, if we can't do this effectively with our low rates in Vermont and the situation we have in Vermont, then I don't believe anybody can in the nation. I think we're better posed than anybody else to do that. By working together, school districts can learn both from the ASP experiences, and ASP programs can learn from the return to school experiences that we're going to be seeing in the next month or so. Flexibility in thinking, adaptability as necessary, while planning as best we can is going to be the key, need to be the key objective. And I'll just end by saying we're essentially in what I would call a polarity exercise. On one pole, say the South Pole, we have this need for flexibility. We need to be flexible during this crisis. We need to be able to kind of work these things out. And on the other pole, we have this need for certainty, planning. Geez, we need to know what's going on. And unfortunately, we're going to go back and forth between those two poles, and we need to think that way. We need to stop thinking in terms of or and think about and. And just to reiterate on that, you know, we can plan as much as we want, but if tomorrow something comes forward in terms of virus information or staffing concerns, we may have to change on a dime. And people are going to have to give each other a break and just do the best they can to try to live between those two polar opposites. I think, Holly, that's all I would really throw out there.
Oh, just a few things there, Jay, just a few. You hit on a ton. So I want to just give a minute to see if any members of the panel, Ryan or Lynn or Amy, want to respond or pick up on any of those pieces that Jay touched on.
You know, I'll say something, Jay.
I saw you lean forward, and I'm like, she's going for it. So yeah, jump in, Lynn.
Now that I don't sign her paycheck anymore, she gives me no respect.
I was gonna say, I know, just so everybody knows, Jay used to be the superintendent in Franklin Northeast, and was also a big after-school supporter when he was there. So
I'm literally sitting in the chair that used.
Lynn was an awesome principal.
There. He's saying that because he pays me, or used to. So I think that, you know, all the points you made were really great, Jay. And I think that the one of the key pieces is fundamentally we have a childcare issue in the state of Vermont. And I think the reality is, and I think we both know, we're going to spend some time going back and forth between the steps potentially throughout the year. So that idea of flexibility is incredibly important. I think the idea about partnering with our after school staff to be able to do something, whether we are starting in a hybrid and hoping to shift towards something where more kids are returning to in-person, using the after school program staff is essential. And at the same time, there's added complexity because I think in a lot of our after school programs, the staff who are running those programs are also daytime staff in our schools. So I think that the idea of ramping something up on the off days to be able to support families around childcare is one idea. And it is further complicated by also having tasks that those staff members have in person. So I'm hoping, I did notice when I was creeping through and looking at all the people on the call, and I know Steve Berbeco is also on this call, and I was able to hear from Steve last week. I think that the idea of childcare is something that we're a part of, but not solely responsible for. So I think that partnership and that idea of how can we work collaboratively to take on the piece of that we can for those moments in time where we have to spend some time in step 1 in fully remote, or if our step 2 includes some form of hybrid, that's key. And it's not something that we can figure out independently. We need to be collaborating and interdependently addressing that issue. So I'll add, Jay.
Yeah, Ryan.
Ryan, you want to jump in?
I was gonna say something. You know, Jay said something a few weeks ago when we had a Principal Friday forum, and what he said at that time was, now is the time to be working with our families. That we can't make these hard, rigid policies or decisions that aren't collaborative for our families and working together with them. And I think our after-school programs play a really large part in working with our families. And so if we're saying as a school that we can't staff certain days or we can't do certain things, I don't think, like Lynn said, I don't think we take all of that upon our shoulders to say we're responsible for childcare for all of our families. But I do think we open up the conversation to our families and make sure they're aware of the childcare issues that are happening and make sure that they're a part of developing those solutions with us together. So, and I think that personally, that's what I see sometimes as a not happening in some districts right now, that they're not tapping into the community and saying, we need help with this, and that they might be taking a lot of this responsibility on their own shoulders. So that's all I have.
I was just gonna, yeah, I think you're right on with that. You know, what we really learned from remote learning was that parents took an active role in their children's education because they were kind of forced to, right? Like learning came to their homes now, and parents had to really actively engage on some level. And we surveyed them, and we were in constant contact with them. And what it did is it fostered a relationship that was more collaborative. And since doing that, our schools are having forums regularly and inviting participation and explaining that we don't have all the answers, but we want them to be involved. And I just think that's an exciting and beautiful, transformative part of all of this. And I think if we can just stay positive and look for those opportunities to really grow from this and not be bogged down with the weight that many of us are already feeling as a result of it, then I started with saying these are exciting times, and they really are, if we can open our minds to embrace the new ideas that are coming forward.
Thanks, Amy. Stephen Berbeco is on the call, and Lynn already mentioned him. I wanted to see, so Stephen's the Deputy Commissioner at the Child Development Division, and he's been doing a lot of outreach to bridge that conversation between childcare and school. Stephen, would you like to take a minute or two and let folks know about the conversations you're having and the outreach that you've been doing?
Thanks, Holly, and good afternoon, everyone. As Holly mentioned, I'm Stephen Berbeco, Deputy Commissioner for Child Development Division. I see a lot of familiar faces. It's good to see you again, and it's good to meet the new ones. And I'm happy to let you know that we've been working this problem pretty much full time for the last several weeks, at least, in cooperation with Vermont Afterschool and other partners. And I have to say that the solution for the fall is going to come from all of us working together. It's not going to come from any one state agency or frankly, any one community organization. The best solution is going to come from schools and nonprofit organizations and families and community organizations and state agencies working together. I want to let you know about a letter that we sent out recently to superintendents through the Vermont Superintendent Association. And the letter was basically building that connection with them, a connection that we haven't had as strongly as we should have. And I'm really glad that we can start to build it up now, especially when it's most needed. In that letter, we let superintendents know, if they weren't already aware, that there is a statewide child care referral service for Vermonters. It's available for all Vermonters. It's available at no charge. And if you or someone you know is interested in finding out more about that, check out the CDD website and look for the child care referral. It's called the Community Child Care Support Agencies. There are 12 of them around the state. And they can match families with open and available childcare. In that letter, we also made sure that superintendents know about the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, which is available for eligible families to help them afford childcare. It is one of the most supportive child care financial programs of any state, and I'm very proud of it as a Vermonter. And we mentioned those two resources because there has been for a long time this, I'd even say division between childcare and K-12 education. And certainly we feel that in the after-school world as well. And so some superintendents may not be aware of those resources. Also in that letter, we made sure that superintendents know that we are a resource for them if they're looking to stand up programs or expand programs that they have in their schools. And also that we're a resource if they're contacted by a local property owner that wants to volunteer some open space that they have for childcare. We can help put that together. We can vet the space very quickly and help connect them with childcare programs like yours so that we can increase the state's capacity to support school-age children coming into the fall. I am really grateful for this opportunity to talk with you briefly now, and I really hope that we can continue the conversation through Vermont After School and through our other partners. I'm really glad that you are part of this solution, and I look forward to our work together. Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm glad that we could have both these voices and not make it just an education call or just a childcare call, because it really is, after school really is that space that crosses over. Nicole, do you want me to mention the grants or Stephen? Okay, so if you didn't see the announcement, the Department for Children and Families released operating grants. There's $12 million that are for childcare, after school and summer programs. It's open right now. You have until the 14th to get questions in. It's a way for any costs that you've encountered either over the summer due to COVID or as you look to restart or reopen, as long as your program was open this summer or opens by September 8th, which I know is tricky because it's the first day of school. But if you can open that day in some way, it would make you eligible for this funding source. So Nicole has put the link in there, and encourage all of you to take a careful look at the eligibility, submit questions. They have a frequently asked question line, and see. It's really meant to be a way to try to make your program whole and to cover some of those costs that were unexpected and added due to COVID. You will need to have receipts. You will need to make sure that those costs aren't covered by another funding source and so forth, but please take a look at that and take advantage of it. Nicole.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. So with that, I want to express our gratitude to Lynn and to Heather and to Ryan and Jeff and to Amy and Kaylee, as well as Jay and Stephen for joining us today, and to all of you. I think one of the major themes that I heard was this is a time for us to come together and not be talking about one entity being responsible for everything. And so how do we, knit ourselves together to serve families and youth and do that in a collaborative way. And as Amy highlighted so beautifully so many times, to really be innovative during this time and be creative, and that there are silver linings and new things that come out of this opportunity that we have together. And with that, I really want to encourage the rest of you, if you have other stories or other ways that you're working together with your school community, please send those to us. We'd love to highlight stories of what else is happening in the after school field, as well as if you have any additional needs or things that would be helpful in those conversations. Holly, anything else that you would add?
So we do have the, as I said, the vicarious trauma and burnout workshop next week at this time. And we're looking for the week after what would be most useful. So when you think forward to 2 weeks from now, what is the conversation that you want to be having as a statewide community, and what kind of supports could we organize over the next couple of weeks to have that set up and ready for you? So if you have an idea now, use the chat. Otherwise, email any one of us, and we will, start working on that. And please keep your voices strong, and at the local level and at the state level. And thanks again to our panel and to Jay and all of your respective organizations and colleagues. We hope you'll help win even more folks over, principals, superintendents, and curriculum coordinators to the advantages of partnering with After School. So thank you for what you're doing. And we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.